Setelah 2 minggu berturut-turut melemah, indeks harga saham gabungan kembali ditutup menguat pada akhir minggu lalu. Bagaimana arah IHSG pada pekan ini? Sudah saatnya menguat atau mungkinkah akan melemah kembali? Berikut ini analisis pergerakan IHSG dari Bharat Joshi, Head of Investment Aberdeen Asset Management.
Unfortunately, I haven't looked at the market as yet because, in Aberdeen, we are very long-term. So, short-term fluctuations in the market is not something we get very concerned. I think Indonesia is one of those markets typical of an emerging market. There's a lot of volatility in the short term. So for us, we tend to focus more on the long-term fundamentals. So as long as you pick a company which you are happy and you've done your work, it's a good quality company. 1 week, whatever the stock does in 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, it's fine. Because I know I've done my work and I'm very convinced this is a long-term company that I would like to be invested in. You see, the thing is, Indonesia has very strong fundamentals, long-term. Long-term has very strong fundamentals. But in the short term, a lot of the issues with Indonesia is because of macro, more external. So what we have seen with the rupiah, which touching 13,000 already, is mainly because US dollar is appreciating. And despite that, rupiah is just getting weaker by the day. That's okay. But if you look against euro, it's about the same. It hasn't depreciated as much. So it's more people are taking back or going back to safety because they assume the interest rates in the US will increase. But I'm very optimistic for Indonesia long term. In the short term, quite cautious. In the next 3-6 months, because it's all execution. I think Pak Jokowi has doubled the bill for infrastructure spending in the recent budget that was approved. He has to execute. So everyone is waiting for that execution. So in the meantime, if there's no execution, you won't see Indonesia going anywhere in the interim. But if he executes, then the market will do well. But I think we will have to wait and see. The sectors that are interesting for Indonesia, for us, especially from a bottom-up investment, is consumer. We like consumer stocks. And now with the weaker oil prices, the distribution costs or logistic costs would actually start falling. So they can actually see improvement on margins going forward. So we like consumer. Number two, what we like is the banks. Because if Jokowi obviously puts in the execution of the projects, all these companies will need to take lending. They will need to borrow money. And they would nowhere else to go except for the banks. So the banks will continue to do very well this year. What we also like is the telco sector. We own Telkom Indonesia and XL Axiata. And it's a very oligopoly market, 3-player market. And mobile data has been growing very strongly. And this will continue because smartphone penetration is still very low. It's only less than 20%. So we are very comfortable with our consumer sector, our banks. We also like the cement sector, but there's a lot of concern about new competition coming in, new players with no track record, and they're going to sort of soften out cement prices. We are concerned in the short term, but longer term, it's still a very strong 3-player market. So we own cement companies like Indocement and Holcim Indonesia. We have seen the share price weaken. The valuations have become quite attractive. We even bought a bit more to top up. I think for a typical investor, you want to be defensive. Try to go defensive with telco operators. Try to shy away from cyclicals, because if you are investing in cyclicals like construction, but there haven't been any execution as yet, so just shy away until you see real news in the market for execution. So be defensive now, and then perhaps you can take on a bit more risk later in the second half of the year into more commodity-related names. But for us, we like the cyclicality because they're very cheap. So some of them have been very attractive, and because our horizon for investment is 3 to 5 years.